You guys probably can't relate to this, but because of my age, sometimes I misspeak. So, the last class, I was thinking about the class as I was heading home. And I said, did I say there was 300 soap factories and 500,000 tons of soap? And I thought about it a little more, and I said, yeah, I sure did. And I said, whoa, what am I talking about? Worldwide production? So the actual numbers in the late 1800s, it was 30 soap factories instead of 300. Makes a little bit of a difference. And they're mainly in the north in Nablus and in the south in Hebron. And they exported to the Middle East and Europe, not 500,000 tons, but 5,000 tons. Yeah, I talked to my granddaughter and said, would you believe I said that? She said, Sidi, which is grandpa, what are you going to do about it? I said, I'm good. Hey, when you get to be as young as I am, you could go out and say, hey, I made a mistake, and it's fine. Yeah, so this is the two things that I said I wanted to start the day with. Today we're going to cover the period between 1916-17 until 1948. It's a very important period in Palestinian history, and also I was told you guys like PowerPoint. So I said, sure, I think I could work up something. So I did, again, with the help of the young ones. You can do this. I said, okay, sure. So hopefully, and if there's any other suggestions, I'm always open for suggestions. Not just open for suggestions. Suggestions are greatly appreciated.
Do you want me to get the lights a little bit? Is it going to be hard to see?
You guys okay with the lights the way they are, or we could? Or draw one. There we go. Yeah, that's much better. Thank you. That period, it's very important in Palestinian history, and as some people might want to say, the history of the conflict. I don't think of it as a conflict, but we'll get into that. After the fall of the Ottoman Empire and the defeat of the Ottomans, the Allies, namely Britain and France, decided to divide the war booty. You know, it's not like we liberated these countries in the Middle East and let the people there rule themselves. No, they met in secret, and they came up with an agreement that literally carved out sections of the Arab Middle East, and between them. So we have France taking control of the Levant plus Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and parts of Iraq. Then Britain taking parts of Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the Gulf states. And also the original agreement, Palestine, the entire country of Palestine was supposed to be under international rule. But they changed later on. That will be given to the British, along with Jordan. what's the purpose of this division? Well, they wanted to reward the Emir of Saudi Arabia, the Faisal family, for helping them in the war effort. So they carved up these weird lines arbitrarily, made them into quasi-states, and exported members of these tribes from Saudi Arabia and from the Arabian Peninsula and appointed them as kings, rulers of these areas. So we have in Jordan the Hashemites. Hashemites are min Bani Hashim from Saudi Arabia, from the tribe of Bani Hashim. They're not even Jordanians. They're not local. And so here you become king of Jordan, King Abdullah. King Faisal, oh, you become king of Iraq. And who did they pick? History will show that they looked for the most ruthless tribal leaders and gave them countries. And we have not recovered yet from that as the Arab world goes. I keep telling my fellow Arabs that they divided us and we believed them. We actually bought it, lock, stock, and barrel. But what's the conditions of giving somebody a piece of territory and say, you're king? The condition is, you do whatever you want to do to control your people. We don't care. As long you be a good boy. You protect our interest. And unfortunately, it has not changed yet. The latest example, back and forth, if y'all saw the press conference between King Abdullah II of Jordan and President Donald Trump, or the Emperor of the US, the future Emperor, or at least trying to be. And when Trump talked about transferring the people of Gaza out of Gaza and sending them to Jordan and Egypt, the king, all he could do is squirm, couldn't even say no. Well, we'll have to think about it, and well, Jordan has taken 2,000 children, but we'll have to wait till after the meeting of the Arab Summit, and we'll consider it. And couldn't even say no. Couldn't even say no to ethnic cleansing and genocide. Because all these leaders, their fathers and grandfathers before them, are employees. They're employees to the Western powers that appointed them. And originally it was France and Britain, but now we have a new superpower, and that's the United States. They just cannot say no, because they would lose their job. This is the reality of the Sykes-Picot Agreement. And when 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution took over Tsarist Russia, they found a copy of the original Sykes-Picot Agreement, because Russia was supposed to have control of some parts of Jerusalem because of their interest there. Vladimir Lenin they published it in Izvestia, and Lenin said, this is the agreement between colonial fiefs. This is how he described it. But anyway, that was 1916. In 1917, we have Britain that's supposed to be in control of Transjordan, Palestine, and parts of Iraq, decided that we need to support this Zionist movement. And Sir Balfour, the Foreign Secretary, writes a letter. Who does he write the letter to? The head of the Jewish Agency, Rothschild, who was a friend of his and one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest, Jewish family in Europe. And it was a simple letter. Some people refer to it as one sentence. I refer to it as one paragraph because that shows how good I write. I can't write a sentence that long. And all it says is, His Majesty's government views with favor the establishment of a Jewish national home in Palestine, providing, and I'm paraphrasing here maybe just a little bit, that it does not prejudice the rights, civil, religious, or political rights of the non-Jewish inhabitants in Palestine. There are several problems with that. And also he follows it, please forward it to Theodor Herzl, the head of the Zionist movement, the Zionist organization. Forward this letter, share it with him. Giving them our support, this is what we want to do. We're going to support their effort. Don't keep it to yourself. Several things wrong with it. First of all, Palestine is not your territory to give to anybody. It's not like you would favor the establishment of a Jewish national home in Wales. You're giving them somebody else's land. Second of all, you share in it with an organization that is a colonial settler organization. An organization that, by today's definition of anti-Semitism, is the most anti-Semitic organization that ever existed. Is the Zionist organization. Because it didn't care about the Jews. And the proof of that is they did not help any Jew to escape the persecution from Europe, the European persecution of the Jews, to go anywhere else except to Palestine. The Zionist organization was asked if they will help the Jews to immigrate across the Atlantic to the US. And the response was not 1 cent. Not 1 cent will go to facilitate the travel of a Jew to the US, only to Palestine. Because they had an agenda, a colonial settler agenda. And they proceeded with that plan. The population in Palestine in 1917, there was about 100 and some, 120, 130. kibbutzes, which is settlements, European Jewish settlements. European Jewish settlements. And they were armed and trained. They had their own security forces, their own perimeters. They didn't mix with the local population. It was a colonial project. That's, this is the Balfour Declaration. So 2 years later, or 3 years later, the British Mandate came to play. Okay, this is a mandatory government. And what does that mean? That you will be in charge of this territory for a period of time, a limited period of time, to help the local population establish their own government. And then you're supposed to leave. The British mandate in Palestine wasn't supposed to go beyond 1949. And Palestine was supposed to be declared as an independent state, with all of its inhabitants, Muslims, Christians, and Jews. But at the same token, when they gave their support through the Balfour Declaration to the Zionist movement, and the rise of anti-Semitism further and more with the rise of Nazi Germany and the persecution of the Jews in Tsarist Russia as well, the influx of Jewish settlers was tremendous. There was no natural growth of the population. We start seeing 100,000 increase, 100,000 people come in a year, when in early 1900s, the Jewish population was at best less than 10% of the total population of 700,000. So there was 7,600 Palestinian Jews that's been there for millennia, all through history. But we start seeing large immigration of European Zionists. They are paramilitary, controlling buy-in lands, and a lot of the land that they bought also was not from Palestinians. A lot of the land was called, quote unquote, public land. And some of it was from the Palestinian community. But they set up their own little colonies, and that's, I guess, the best way to describe them. And one of those colonies was near our village. And the way my grandparents will describe it, it's called Atarot. And it had a fence and guards. And they had cattle, raised cattle within the fence, and some poultry. But the Palestinians, farmers and villagers, if they wanted to sell anything to the colonists, they can't go through the fence, they can't go in. It was on Palestinian land, carved out in between 5 villages. And it has roads to Jerusalem, similar to what is happening today. But today it's on a much larger scale because it has the support of the government, and it's an official policy. These settlements continued to grow. You could go to the next slides. And go to the next one. So, what, yes?
So when these settlements were formed in these colonies, and I can see that, they're carving out and putting fences around, but why would they feel that they needed guards back then?
Why they need to guard it? Because, of course, we're coming to that.
Okay,
The Palestinians didn't like the idea
got it.
of Europeans that are coming there. They don't speak the language. They're not locals. They're not the same as their Jewish neighbors. And they tell you they don't want to deal with you. They're isolating themselves, and they're mushrooming everywhere. It's not like, oh, just one settlement. So the Palestinians said, well, this is what's happening. They're taking over the country. They're taking over the country. And no, we're not going to accept that. And some of the Palestinian Jewish community said, no, they don't represent us. These are Zionists. And it took a while for the Jewish community in Palestine to have to make a decision. Do I go with the European Jews because of my faith, or do I fight them? And that's a tough place to be in. I wouldn't want to be put in that place. And that's when some of the local Palestinian Jews, some of them, and again, some of them, accepted the idea of Zionism, but then a good portion of them did not. Until today. Until today, in Jerusalem, the ones that get brutalized, literally brutalized, beat up by the Israeli police and the Israeli armed forces are members of the Jewish community that don't recognize Israel. They don't recognize the authority of Israel. I said, no, that's not in our name.
I feel like we should, I don't know, are we okay,
Yeah, it's okay.
My husband used to tell me that the reason that,
Speak louder.
Or use the mic. Yeah. Not if they're behind you. Hold it very close.
Can you hear me?
That was clear.
I feel so powerful. My husband used to tell me that the reason that a lot of the Jews ended up in Israel is because basically the countries they were in before were jealous of them. A lot of them had reached positions look at America right now, and a lot of them had a lot of money. They were a lot of our, entertainers. A lot of people that are very successful are Jewish. So they always felt like it competed with them. And the reason they wanted to go to Israel is because then they wouldn't have to, they could do whatever, there was no limit to what they would be allowed to do. And I just wondered how you felt about that thought.
Well, I think that's maybe in part, but I don't think that is the overriding reason. I think the overriding reason is the persecution of the Jews. I mean, let's not belittle what Europe did to the Jews. But at the same token, Christian Europe offered no solution except get rid of them. That is the problem. And initially they were welcomed by the Palestinian community. These people are suffering, they're being persecuted, sure. But when they saw the plan that they're not just refugees, they're coming to ethnically cleanse you and make you a refugee, take your place to replace you, that when the Palestinians start saying no, we're promised a state. You welcome as members of that state, but not to replace us. And then Britain itself, that gave the promise through the Balfour Declaration, when they saw how things were turning out, we come to the early 30s, they said, this is not working. The Zionist movement is going way too far. The immigration is way too great. There have to be a better way, so we can't continue at that level. We need to limit the number of Jews that can immigrate to Palestine. So they come up with the white paper. And that basically said we're going to put a limit to Jewish immigration, which wasn't a small number anyway. I believe it was like 70,000 a year, no more than 70,000 a year. And the Zionist movement said, in no way, there is no limit in Jewish immigration. And an interesting twist of history, and people from the other side always say the Palestinian leadership, the Palestinian High Commission, and Al-Hajj Amin al-Husseini, he wanted to meet with Hitler, or he met Hitler, and he was an anti-Semite, and he wanted to ally himself with Hitler. Okay. Let's, for a moment, say, okay, he did meet with Hitler, even though this is in question. But I think it was someone by the name of Winston Churchill that said, I would ally myself with the devil, and we cherish that statement to defeat the Axis powers. I'll ally myself with the devil. And if a Palestinian who wasn't elected by anybody met with a German official to try to stop or to limit the Jewish Zionist immigration to Palestine, I can see conceivably it could have happened. But what's really interesting is who else wanted to ally himself with the German Nazi Party. Not just meeting with it, but wanted to ally themselves with it. That's the interesting question, and the real interesting answer is a guy by the name of Yitzhak Shamir, who later becomes the Prime Minister of Israel. And he's head of the Stern gang, the Lahai. And when the British decided they want to limit the Jewish immigration, he had a proposal that was approved by the Haganah, by David Ben-Gurion initially, and Menachem Begin. That Menachem Begin group and the Ergun and the Stern gang, Yitzhak Shamir's group, would fight on the side of Germany, Nazi Germany, to defeat the British, because they're limited immigration to Palestine, and that is not acceptable. Later on, the Haganah said, no, we're not part of this deal. Historians say that Shamir wasn't aware that the Haganah reneged on the agreement 2 days later and said, no, we're not part of this. And that's when they start fighting it, a three-pronged war. They were fighting with the Palestinians and fighting against the British. The Ergun and the Stern gangs were fighting against the British. And one of their most infamous acts, as far as against the British, was the bombing of the King David Hotel. And it was interesting in reading about the bombing of the King David, why the King David Hotel in Jerusalem was targeted. Because there was a British, it was the headquarters for the British Army and for the British ruling government, mandate government in Palestine. They had a commission a year earlier that did research and investigation into the activities of the Zionist movement, and they had documented the involvement of the National Jewish Fund, or the Jewish Agency, in facilitating and helping the Zionist movement. And those documents were kept in the headquarters of the British Mandate government in the King David Hotel. So here we are implicating not just the Zionist movement, but the Jewish agency that was financing the immigration of the Jews into Palestine, and there are documents to prove it, so that's why the King David was targeted. And it's really interesting about the labeling of who is a terrorist and who is not. Begin and Shamir, they both were wanted by the British. And there is wanted posters for both of these guys for terrorist activities. Palestine, just,
I thought we had the.
no, it's okay. Just keep moving, it's all right. Palestine, during these years, prior to 1948, prior to the creation of Israel, there was several hundred, and when I say several hundred, the number ranges between 400 to 550 Palestinian villages that were ethnically cleansed during that period to make room for a Jewish state. How are you going to make a Jewish state in a country that's inhabited by people other than Jews? How are you going to do it? The answer is simple. You ethnically cleanse them. You force them to leave, or you kill them. Then you become a majority. But when you are in a country that the majority of its population, even at the height of Jewish immigration, at best, you represent 10 to 15, 20% of the population. But you control, you have the weaponry.
What was the period when these villages were destroyed?
Prior to the creation of the state of Israel, before it declared itself as an independent state in May 15, 1948. Some of them were after, but the majority were before.
So is that whole length of time?
It's the whole length of time.
20s,
They were building Jewish-only settlements, white European Jews, and at the same time encroaching on and getting rid of Palestinian villages. And there is documentations of how many massacres were committed between 1917 to 1948, to May 15, 1948. And the numbers are from 23 to in the 40s to in the hundreds, but the number of villages is not in dispute that's been forced to leave. I'll give you an example, and just so we know what methods that were used. And one example that stands out, but before I get to the massacre, the Palestinian revolt of 1936, that was an important event because the Palestinians decided that's not acceptable. British rule has to end. Jewish colonization has to stop. So the response by Great Britain, along with the Zionist organization, was brutal against the mostly haphazardly armed Palestinians. They can buy a weapon from the British, or they can buy a weapon from one of the Israelis. These are some of the dates and of some of the massacres. But one massacre, I'll get to you in a second, that stands out because it's the most well documented, was the massacre of Deir Yassin. The massacre of Deir Yassin occurred in April of 1948, April 8th, before the declaration of the State of Israel, before the first Arab-Israeli war. There was no Arab armies invading Israel, there was no fighting. Deir Yassin on the outskirts of Jerusalem, and it was chosen in a meeting between the Haganah, the Irgun, and the Stern gang, in spite of the fact, and because of the fact, that Deir Yassin had signed an agreement with the Zionist organizations, with the Haganah, and saying the agreement is an agreement of non-aggression. We will not fight you, we will not resist, you just leave us alone. There is a signed agreement of non-aggression between Deir Yassin and the Zionist organizations. And precisely and exactly because of that reason, it was targeted, to make an example for the rest of the Palestinian population, that even if you sign agreements with us, like Deir Yassin did, you are not safe. They surrounded the village, killed everybody in it. They loaded women and children on the back of trucks and paraded them through the Jewish quarters in Jerusalem, then took them back to Deir Yassin and killed them. And this is the history that's documented by non-Palestinians. The number in Deir Yassin, the real number is around 450 villagers that were massacred. And it was publicized. If you don't want what happened to Deir Yassin to become your fate, you need to leave. And there's Kibya, Nahalin, there is Tantura, there is Haifa, the list goes on and on and on. And so when Palestinians saw this happening, when in Jaffa, in the northern part of Palestine, an entire neighborhood, 150 Palestinian buildings and homes were demolished, and those who didn't leave in time were in them. The rest of the population went north. And now they say, well, they left on their own. Why should we take them back? Well, what does the civilian population do? When there is a war, what do? You try to take your family to a safe place. But it's not like things were great and all of a sudden the Palestinians, they just decided, well, we're going to leave. So when we say 400, and there is some numbers that says 535 villages that were ethnically cleansed, and there is a map of shrinking Palestine, or shows. No, you're going too far.
Before the break? I thought it
We're
was after the
almost.
break.
It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah. It's in the handouts out there. Yes, you'll see where the Jewish settlements were, and what's left of Palestine today, and what was left of it in 1948. And the interesting part really is when they say there was never a state of Palestine. Well, the Zionist movement referred to it as Palestine. The British referred to it as Palestine. The Ottomans referred to it as Palestine. I can trace my ancestor at least 1,000 years that called it Palestine. Jericho, 12,500 years. BC. What were they? What were they? The Jews that been there, that weren't killed by the Romans or the Crusaders, the Palestinian Jews. They're Palestinians. And they weren't killed by Palestinians. Their places of worship were not destroyed by Palestinians. The exact opposite. The exact opposite. As we talked in the last class, Bahar Umar al-Zaydani built synagogues still today that exist in the northern Galilee during his 30-some years of rule, or 40 years actually, from 1930 to 1730 to 1774. And Palestine, just to debunk this religious idea, Palestine is of historic importance to all three religions. And no one religion can deny the other. Palestine is the first Qibla in Islam. That's where the Muslims face when they pray, before Mecca. And it was changed to Mecca. But it was the first. Palestine is where the miraculous journey, as we Muslims believe, and the Quran, the Holy Quran states, the Prophet Muhammad in one night traveled from Mecca to Jerusalem, and then from there he went up to heaven and came back in one night. That's the place where Jesus, alayhi salam, was born, and where he preached, and where he died, and where he resurrected. That's according to Christianity. Moses went from Egypt to where? To Palestine. Abraham, the father of all the Abrahamic religion, is buried where? In Hebron, in Palestine. Joseph, outside of Nablus. John, in Palestine. Zechariah, in Palestine. All that you can't travel a few kilometers in Palestine without coming across a place that is holy and revered by one or all three religions. So for a European to come and hijack a religion, and this is how I refer to Zionism, to hijack a religion to implement their colonial settler ideas, it's ridiculous. It's just outrageous. It doesn't make any sense. And we continue to regurgitate the same stories, even though they've been debunked throughout history, just like we are regurgitating today October 7th. Like creation happened on October 7th. But what happened before, for 76 years or 100 years, that didn't happen. We don't say it. There's nothing happened. Like these people in Gaza were living so great, but on October 7th they just decided to do something that was horrendous, horrible, and they deserve everything they got and everything they're getting. And they don't deserve to live there. They need to be ethnically cleansed. They need to be moved to different parts of the world. They're human animals. This is who we are. And when I say this is who we are as human beings. I like to think that humanity is better than that. And each one of us, when they dig deep down inside our soul and look at the other, we say, yeah, he's just like me. He may look a little different, he may worship a little different, but that's God to judge, not me. We regurgitated the Zionist paradigm and the Zionist line for so long. The ingathering of the Jews. Well, the Jews never left. And those who can trace their ancestors to Palestine, they're probably the minority of the world Jewry, trying to tell me that there is no Jew in the world that converted to Judaism outside of Palestine. It's just their offsprings. I find that to be a little bit far-fetched, to say the least. It's just like saying the ingather of the Muslims should be in Saudi Arabia. We have 2 billion Muslims worldwide, but Islam started in Saudi Arabia. Well, let's bring them all back to Saudi Arabia. That's Islamic nationalism. And all the Jews, all the Christians should be in Bethlehem and Jerusalem, because they're Christian heritage. If we don't accept that for the Muslims or the Christians, why we regurgitate it and accept it for the Jews? It just doesn't make sense, because it's nonsense. Then they throw in our face the only safe haven. They could only be safe in the state of their own. Well, that's the biggest anti-Semitic statement I ever heard. Are you trying to tell me that Jews cannot live in peace with any other group? They have to have a place of their own to be safe? I like to think not. I like to think that Jews just like any other people. They're good people. My best friends are Jews. And not from today. From my early years in college. One of my best buddies' name is Robert Prince in Denver, Colorado. Met him while I was going to school. Until today, he is a blogger, anti-Zionist, and he will tell you his story that his parents planted a tree. He comes from a Zionist family in his name in Jerusalem and donated money. And he got a little bit older and started reading. He said, this is crazy. My sister is sitting here, and I call her my sister, and I'm honored to refer to her as my sister. Nancy Ween. I'm a Muslim. She's a Jew. I love her just like I love my sister. Well, that's from my mom. I refer to her as my sister from a different mother. She's one of my family. And a lot of my Jewish friends, and I don't say it that I am so great and I have Jewish friends as a show and as a talking. No. No. I will not accept to be a talking Muslim, and I will not accept anybody to use my Jewish friends and our Jewish brothers and sisters for tokenism purposes. Oh, we have a Jew with us today. No. We have real human beings. Some of the things that I will recommend for you to read. The writings of Miko Peled, the general's son, raised in a Zionist family. His father was a general, and his grandfather was one of the signers of the Israeli Declaration of Independence. And his father was one of the architects of the 1967 war. He is more Palestinian than I am. And the way he talks about it, he used this language that I can't bring myself to say. If somebody asked him a question and he looked at him, which world are you living in? What the hell are you talking about? He opened Palestine Freedom House in Washington, D.C. Read his book, The General's Son. Then Jeff Halper, Israeli Committee Against House Demolition. An Israeli, a Jew, anti-Zionist. And these are just a small sample. There's plenty out there that are saying the things that I'm saying and then some, and I'm going to stop right here so we can stretch our legs, and we will continue in about 10. It's been referred to as Palestine by the Ottomans, by the British, and prior to that, the Byzantines, they referred to it as Palestine, which is where the original name of Palestine. So at least for a couple of thousand years, it's been referred to as Palestine. And even the Zionist movement referred to it as Palestine, to create a Jewish national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, in gathering of the exiles in Palestine, not Israel. There was not a country named Israel. There was a couple of Jewish kingdoms, but there was no Israel. Israelites is a group of people that lived in that area at one point, one time or another. But and then the question when people say, do you think that Israel have a right to exist?
I'm on your mic.
Oh, the microphone? I thought I was loud enough. Okay. You hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. And I get that question a lot. Do you think Israel have a right to exist? My response is, no state has a right to exist as the apparatus of a state. States don't have right to exist. People have a right to exist, but not states. If our form of government today in the United States continues in the direction it's heading, and Trump gets a third term, and the Supreme Court does nothing, and the Congress is absent, and we become a dictatorship, does the United States have a right to exist? That government? No. The people in the United States have a right to exist. And the same thing applies to Israel. The system that exists today, that is the colonial settler state, that is by unanimous agreement by the international community, is an apartheid state, with the exception of the United States and a few other islands that are insisting, no, it's not, it's a democracy. But you can't be a democracy when you define yourself by law in 2022, they codified it. That Israel does not have a constitution, by the way, till today. They have what they call basic law. And in 2022, they were clear. They said no one other than a Jew will have national rights in Israel. National rights are only for Jews and Jews only. No. When this state, it has a road system for one group only, Jews only. Entire cities, Jews only. And the non-Jews in that state are 3 or 4 different tiers. The Arabs of 1948, Christians and Muslims who decided that they're going to risk everything and stay and not leave, are Israeli citizens. But you go into any Arab town, and I don't have to be with you. You don't need to see any sign. You know you're in an Arab town, an Arab Israeli town. How would you know? The roads are narrow and cupped. The infrastructure almost non-existent. Schools are not funded. Health care is very limited. Then you travel out of that town, and it's in the same condition as it was in 1948. I traveled to Palestine, I'd rather call it Palestine, several times in the last 15 years or so, and I made a point of driving through 1948 Palestine, just to see. My in-laws live outside of Akka, and the town is called Akka, not Akko, because they took the names of the Palestinian towns even, and they just added a letter, took a letter, and made it sound like it's a Hebrew name, but it's not. Akka is Akka. You could call it Akko all you want, but it's still Akka. And Haifa is Haifa. And Yafa is Yafa and will never be Jaffa. Bisan is not Beit Shan, it's Bisan. So I traveled to these towns. And no one had to tell me that I entered the town of Judaidah. Because the houses, you can't build but so much. You can't expand the road but so much. It's the same as it was in 1948. But the settlement that's built next to Judaidah, you look at it and you say, wow, We don't have subdivisions that good right here in Chesterfield County. We really don't. When they talk about settlements in the West Bank, these so-called settlements are sprawling cities. They're 10, 15,000. The houses are fantastic looking. And as Palestinians, when your electricity only comes on for a few hours a day, and you look across the mountain, and there is an Israeli settlement, and it's lit like daytime at night, and you get water for only 1 day a week, and it's only for a few hours. On top of every Palestinian house, there are several tanks, these black or silver tanks, because you have to fill up, so you will have enough till the next week. You don't see those tanks on top of the Israeli housing units and the settlements, not one, because they have running water 24/7 and swimming pools, and you can't travel to it. You can't travel on the same road. And this is 1948, 1967. It's in the Negev, the Palestinian Negev, the Negev Desert, the Bedouins in the Negev Desert. Until today, they are not recognized as full Israeli citizens. They have Israeli citizenship, but they don't have road systems. Some places they don't have electricity. Some places the Iron Dome does not protect them. They're Israeli citizens, but they're Arabs. And this is the highest class of the Palestinian Arabs. Yeah, they vote. Yeah, there is few of them in the Knesset. But when it comes to allocation of resources, there is none. Then you have the second tier of Palestinians, those who are in the West Bank. The West Bank, they don't have citizenship to anywhere. They have an ID card, or even sometimes a passport that says Palestinian Authority, not the Palestinian state, even though some Palestinian leaders like to sell it as it's a state, but it's not. It's a Palestinian Authority. The tags on their cards are different color. The Israeli tags are yellow. Palestinian card, even though it's issued by the same country and the same DMV, but it's green. So at a checkpoint, any recruit can decide who's in that car before he gets to it. In Jerusalem, Israel annexed Jerusalem in 1967. They annexed it, but they didn't annex the people, because they don't want the people. So a person living in Jerusalem has an identity card different than a person living in Bir Nabala or in Ramallah or in 1948. They're different. And you have, if you leave Jerusalem on a trip and you stay more than 3 months, you lose that card, the identity card, and you can't return. You cannot leave Jerusalem if you are a Palestinian, and and stay more than 3 months out of the country, you can't return. And I know many Palestinians that lost their card that way. Because again, they want to ethnically cleanse all of Palestine. And they defined it as Palestine.
Are those in Jerusalem, citizens?
No, again, this is like, are they citizens of Israel? No. They have an identity card.
But so they're different from the Jews living in Israel?
Absolutely. They're different than the Jews living in Jerusalem, and they're different than the Palestinian Arabs living in 1948 Israel, prior to 67, and they're different than those who are living in the West Bank. You know, so many different tiers. The road system, even in the West Bank, you could travel from any settlement to any settlement without, and this is their selling point. Look at the racism. You could drive from a settlement in the Jordan Valley near Jericho to Tel Aviv without ever crossing an Arab town, a Palestinian village or a Palestinian town. That's their selling point. And you don't have to see an Arab. You can travel between any colony to another colony anywhere in the West Bank, and they don't call it the West Bank, anywhere in Judea and Samaria without seeing an Arab. Without seeing an Arab. Really? This is a state that I want to defend its right to exist? What's left of the West Bank? This so-called two-state solution, and people that talk about it. When you take out the road system, and I keep going back to that because really this needs to be hammered to where our politicians will understand. When you take out the road system between settlements, and you take out the settlements, and you take out the firing zones that declared as firing zones, what's left in the West Bank? And this is the West Bank, and this is Gaza. What is left of this West Bank is 5%. Less than 5% of the total area of Palestine. And it's fragmented. There is a little bit over here, a little bit in Ramallah, a little bit here, and how many checkpoints do you think there is? Military checkpoints that a Palestinian have to stop at in the West Bank. Now it's 1,000. Now it's 1,000 checkpoints. From our village to Ramallah, which wasn't always our choice to travel. We used to travel to Jerusalem because it's 10 minutes by car, or maybe half an hour by bus. But now we can't because we have to go from Bir Nabala, that's here. We have to go around, come around here to an entrance here, and there is a checkpoint about there, and another checkpoint here that's an international crossing border. That is manned by a recruit or conscript from Richmond, could be from Brooklyn, because they speak English better than I do most of the time, that looks at my passport, with my visa, 3 months visiting visa, and I got good old blue passport. They look at my name, oh, Adib Mahmoud Abed. Oh, where are you going? I'm going to Jerusalem. What are you going to do in Jerusalem? Why are you asking me? I have a visa. And the visa says to visit Israel. It's your visa. I go wherever I want. Excuse me? Go back. Why? I told you go back. But why? Look, go back or you will be arrested. Okay, when can I come back? just go back. No explanation. That is going from Bir Nabala to Jerusalem. Going to visit by way of Ben Gurion Airport. I was denied entry 5 times. And not a single time was I given a reason. Not once was I given a reason why. I will be held up for a couple of hours, then an 18-year-old again, or a young man or woman will come to me and hand me my passport, the entry denied, you'll be on the next plane out. But why? Because entry denied. Yes, ma'am.
So question, after October 7th, many people from Gaza, the West Bank, left Palestine and flew somewhere. So how did they get out of Palestine if they couldn't even get to Jerusalem to fly?
Oh, to get out? That's the easiest thing that you can do. That is the easiest thing. All you have to see is, I went out through the Allenby Bridge to Jordan. Godspeed, young man. Go. But try to come back.
So they went to Jordan and Lebanon?
No, there is no crossing in Lebanon.
Okay, how about Egypt?
No, the Rafah clause in Egypt has been sealed since 2007.
So-
Gaza, the world didn't get created on October 7th. Let's talk about October 7th, because we're not going to leave that till the very end. We'll talk about it again. Okay. October 7th, it's not like everything in Gaza was hunky-dory, like we say here, and everything was great, and then these terrorists decided to just one day commit horrendous crimes against Israel. Let's look at Gaza. Why is there Hamas in Gaza first? And I'm not a fan of Hamas. But there was elections in 2006. Palestinians held an election, and Hamas ran in those elections for the West Bank and Gaza, for the entire area. And because of the corruption of the PA, Hamas won, hands down, in an election year. And that was monitored by international observers. And everybody said the elections there is no issues with them whatsoever. Israel and the United States said, no, we don't recognize the results. Hamas said, no, we won the election. We're the ones that should form the government, not the party that lost the election. So that's where the friction came about. And the party that lost the election wanted to oust Hamas physically out of Gaza. And there was a fight in Gaza between two factions, two Palestinian factions. And that's Hamas and Fatah, the party that won and the party that lost. And the party that won the election apparently had some popular support because they routed the party that lost the election. What does Israel do? Sealed Gaza. And when I say sealed, they sealed Gaza from the sea, the air, and land. Nothing in or out. Nothing. And when people try to break the siege, we have people that would try to break the siege by sea on the Freedom flotillas, and they get bombed. They get bombed by the Israeli Navy. We have people that go in Gaza to show solidarity to stop home demolitions by the Israelis. and they got ran over by bulldozers. American citizens. Look up Rachel Corrie, a beautiful young lady, a beautiful person. Her crime was trying to protect somebody's home. That the Israelis bulldozer, by the way, it was one of our bulldozers that were supplied to Israel. Caterpillar D9 bulldozer that went over her body. What does the U.S. do? Nothing. Nothing. U.S. citizen means nothing. If you are a Palestinian, and if you are a supporter of Palestine or the Palestinian cause, and you get killed, you get imprisoned, you get deported, the United States does absolutely nothing. Our citizenship means nothing. Our passport means nothing. It's a joke. It's a joke. In the holding cell in Ben Gurion Airport, the guy in charge, he said, "Do you want to call the U.S. consulate? I have the number for them." I said, "No, I don't want to call them." He said, "Well, just in case you want to call them." I said, "No," because my daughter, who was traveling with me, she did. She called them. And they told her there's nothing we can do. Are they giving him a place to sleep and something to eat? So, yeah, he's in a holding cell. I'm sure they're throwing something for him to eat, and he got a cot or something. He's in a holding cell. He's in jail. No, we can't do nothing about it. Israel is a sovereign state, and we cannot interfere as to who is allowed and who is not allowed in their country. But my dad is a U.S. citizen. That doesn't matter. That's exact word of the U.S. consular in Tel Aviv. It doesn't matter. Only last week, a 14-year-old Palestinian American gets killed. You hear nothing about it. It doesn't make the news. In the last week, not the last week, let's say in the 6 weeks after Israel renewed their bombardment on Gaza, over 500 children have been killed. It doesn't make the news. But Russia launched a ballistic missile or a drone on Kiev, and it hit a residential building, and a family of, including 8 children, were killed. It is a horrible thing. I don't take pleasure in having any child killed anywhere. But that gets reported in all 3 networks, in all newspapers. Everybody is up in arms. But 500 Palestinian children on the same time frame. Not a blip.
I read every day about Palestine.
There is every single day, there is Palestinian children, 10, 15, 20, on daily basis.
Well, it's in the newspaper. I read about it every day, about Palestine and how many people have been killed.
Yeah, but what do you know about them except the number?
Well, the circumstances, they say,
Yeah.
where they were killed and what they bombed this hospital. And
Imagine this. And I want to take the official numbers. I don't want to take what health organization, international health organizations say that the number. Out of 2 million people, there is over 65,000 killed, over 50%, or actually no more than that, or 80% are women and children.
the newspaper says that.
Stay with me. Do we know the story? Do we connect a face with any of these people, or just numbers that newspaper said, yeah, there is this many numbers killed? But when somebody, and I'm going to play the race card, yes, when white blonde, blue eyes gets killed, we know their name. I never forget when the war started in Ukraine and students were trying to flee. And a lot of people from the Ukraine wanted to flee to European countries, and they're standing at the railroad waiting for the trains. If you're brown or black, you have to wait. And a reporter, a US reporter, look at these refugees. Look at these people trying to escape. They are like us. Blonde and blue eyes. Look at them. That's not me saying it. That's a reporter from the United States on national TV. No, there is a problem here. The massacres that are being committed, and you know why it's not enough to say the numbers? Because you and I and him and her and everybody, we're paying for it. Every single bomb that dropped on Gaza is US made. That's why we have a different responsibility. Every single bomb. So the blood of the Palestinians in Gaza are on our hands. I feel convoluted. Do I want to file taxes or I don't? Do I want to pay taxes or I don't? Because in Chesterfield County and Richmond area, each one of us on a yearly basis, each one, not each family, each individual is sending $74 to Israel from your tax money. Each one of us, and multiply that by the number of your family. Yes?
It would be helpful if you would explain how AIPAC has influenced the government.
Sure. I will address that because some people ask me about Joe Biden. I think he's the highest recipient of AIPAC money in the history of U.S. politics over the years. I think.
What is AIPAC?
It's American Public Affairs Committee, or it's a Jewish lobbying group, a Zionist lobbying group.
American Israeli Political Action
Yeah, Political Action Committee. American Israeli Political Action Committee. Thank you, man. And they try to buy, and they do. And they do. Because elections are run on money. Joe Biden, I believe he received over the years close to 1.5 or 1.6 million dollars from AIPAC. Joe Biden identifies as I'm a Zionist. Yeah. You could Google it or YouTube it and you'll find him standing there saying it. Standing there in front of AIPAC in their convention, I am proud to identify as a Zionist because you don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. But me, personally, I think there is a way to counter AIPAC. There is a way. And they're beginning to feel it. And that is by getting involved. Because what does AIPAC do? What do politicians do with the money that AIPAC gives them?
Win elections.
But how? What do they do with it? They buy ads. That's the only thing they do with it. They buy ads, whether it's online, on TV, in newspapers, and spread whatever lies they want. But if we organize and get involved in all levels, they can't buy us.
They can't buy our votes, no matter how much they spend. I don't advocate that we have to donate more than AIPAC, because we can't. And let's be real, because we can't. Yes?
Well, you could argue that if you go back through U.S. presidencies, virtually all of them supported Israel, but nobody has supported the Israeli right like the current president. He is all in. He wants them to have the West Bank and Gaza.
Oh, he wants it to have all of Palestine,
Yes.
and he's clear about it. The only difference between the current president and previous presidents is this guy doesn't know how to sugarcoat anything. He just says it and let whatever hit the fan, who cares? Not just Israel have a right to exist. Yeah, what they're doing in the West Bank, they have a right to do it. There is no Hamas in the West Bank. But Israel has killed over 2,000 people in the West Bank since October 23, in the West Bank. They have transferred, ethnically cleansed, and forced people. Over 45,000 Palestinians been internally displaced. Several camps in the West Bank, Jenin, Tul Karam, Rafidia, Kalandia, are demolished. Why? Because we want to make life so miserable for them that they would have to leave. Just exactly like what Katz is saying, that Katz is the Israeli defense minister, about Gaza. We're going to make life so miserable for them. We're going to make Gaza uninhabitable to where going anywhere would look good and they would have to leave. But they don't understand the Palestinian mentality, and that is of any native. The attachment that the people have to their land. And they understand also what it means to leave. They know when you leave, you don't come back. The people in Gaza, they left in 1948. 80% of the population in Gaza are refugees. And you're trying to tell me that these people are gonna get on the bus and go to Egypt or go to Jordan to a camp? You should see the pictures and the videos that we see. People going back to the rubbles of their house, cleaning what's left and setting up a tent, and they look at the reporter and they say, Alhamdulillah, we're staying. Thanks be to God, we're staying, we're going to rebuild. We're going to stay and rebuild. And their family members being killed, their house is destroyed, their livelihood is destroyed, they're eating, some of them, less than one meal a day, and they're saying, we're staying, we're not going. Yes, ma'am.
When Hamas first came into being and was elected, did they have a platform they were running on? How did they present their
Okay, Hamas,
Not here.
the question was, when Hamas got elected, did they have a platform that they ran on? Actually, that platform that they ran on was the same platform, the two-state solution. They were against the corruption. But what happened, before we get into, let's see how Hamas got created and when, and that's important. Hamas got created in the late 80s. Why in the late 80s? In the late 80s, there was an uprising in the Palestinian territories, in Gaza and the West Bank. People finally said, enough is enough. We've taken on the Israelis with stones, and nothing else, with our bare bodies. And if you look up the first uprising, the first intifada, you will see that the images that were coming out of the Palestinian territories and out of Israel were horrendous. They have a policy, Yitzhak Rabin, the Prime Minister of Israel, a policy of breaking the bones. If a Palestinian kid throws a rock, an Israeli soldier is supposed to break his bones, to break his arm, so he won't throw a rock on the tank. And there is videos of Israeli soldiers holding a Palestinian child's arm, like so, and another soldier carrying a stone about this big and pounding his arm to break it. That's policy. He was following military orders. This was untenable. The PA didn't exist at the time. There was no Oslo agreement, nothing. The Israelis start talking about, hey, we can't continue at this rate. Our image is being tarnished. We're not going to leave Judea and Samaria, but maybe we should leave Gaza, because that's where all this intifada, this uprising started. How are we going to do it? We need to divide the Palestinian movement. We need to divide the Palestinian movement. And the Palestinian movement in the West Bank and Gaza was led locally by the unified command of the Intifada, of the uprising. The outside PLO had nothing to do with it. Didn't even know that it was happening until it happened. So what are we going to do? We're going to divide them. How are we going to divide them? Oh, there is this faction of the Muslim Brotherhood that's in Gaza. They're a political organization, they're not military, but if we can support them, that will be a counterbalance to the unified command of the uprising. There is a school of thought and some documentation. For sure, King Hussein of Jordan definitely supported the idea, and through Prince Hassan, his brother, Crown Prince at the time. Prince Hassan is the one that was put in charge of implementing it and providing the finances, and Israel agreed to look the other way. And let's name it Hamas. That's where Hamas came about. حركة التحرير الإسلامية. It's a political organization that was created as a fighting organization. I recall during the Intifada when a young man throws a Palestinian flag on an electrical wire or a telephone wire, military jeep will come by, and he goes to the first house, knocks at the door, get the owner of the house, take this flag down. And you better do it, figure a way to do it, you need to do it. Somebody writes a slogan on the wall on the street, they go to the closest house, drag everybody out, paint over it. They beat you, they hit you, but there is somebody saying, writing a slogan about Hamas, and the Israeli soldier will pass by and he keep going. Divide and conquer. But Hamas was made out of Palestinians. They weren't mercenaries coming from outside world. So they didn't care where the money came from or who funded them. Their agenda was purely Palestinian nationalist. We're against the occupation. And again, if you want to end the Intifada, if you want to end Hamas actions, end the occupation. The Israelis don't want to end the occupation. because they want all of Palestine. This is, in a nutshell, it's very, some people say it's complicated, but no, it's really not. It's very simple. It's very simple. There is the people that in the land, and there is somebody that doesn't want it there. Nothing more, nothing less. That is, and then, again, we go back to October 7th. Israel was counting how many calories go into Gaza. That was from 2007 until 2023. Limiting everything that goes in there, including the amount of food, including medical supplies, including fuel, fresh water, everything. The West Bank, there is no Hamas. Why all of a sudden, after October 7th, you attack Gaza and you unleash your settlers and your army on the West Bank? And speaking of hostages, the Palestinian, the entire population is held hostage. But today there is 15,000 Palestinians, 10,000 of them or more, that have no charges brought against them. They're not accused of any crime. They're under what they call administrative detention. That's just another term for being hostage. And it's renewable every 6 months. You don't go in front of a judge because you're not accused of anything. The military picks you up and throws you in a concentration camp, throws you in a jail. We don't hear about that. Nobody says anything about it. And when they do, Palestinian prisoners. Well, if a prisoner, he should be protected by the guards. He should be provided a place to sleep. He should be provided medical care. He should be provided with food. Why, when a Palestinian prisoner is released, he is emaciated, he is sick, a lot of them die in prison, nobody does nothing. Doesn't matter. It does not matter. And I keep repeating that it is, again, it is simple. Their project is to have an ethnocentric state for European Jews only. The only way to have that is to get rid of everybody else. That's the only way. If I want to have a Christian state anywhere, or a Muslim state anywhere, what does it mean that I have to do with the rest of the population? And I declare and I say it clearly, no one else will have national rights except the Muslims. No one will have national rights except the Christians. And Netanyahu says it every day. There will only be one sovereignty between the river to the sea, and that's Jewish sovereignty. But when I say Palestine will be free from the river to the sea, for all those who live in it, I'm anti-Semitic. But when he said it's for Jews only, that is fine.
Curious as to how the Jews, the Israelis, justify what they're doing to the Palestinians, what the Nazis and the Russians did to them.
I wish I could answer that. I wish I could. Because to me, it's painful to think about it even. How could you to use, I think the one that answers it best is not me. Look at Norman Finkelstein. Professor Finkelstein, he was asked that question. And both of his parents are survivors of the Holocaust. Both sides of his family came survivors, and some of them were killed in Auschwitz, and I believe the other camp was Dachau, or at least a couple of concentration camps. And he was asked that question. He said, how dare you? How dare you even ask this question? It's because exactly and precisely because of the memory of my mother and my father and my family that I oppose Zionism and I oppose the state of Israel and what the state of Israel is doing. I think he provides the best answer. And that is the fact. I don't believe that Jews cannot be safe except in a Jewish state. What are you saying about the Jews? Me, as having a Jewish sister, I resent that. Are you saying she can't live with her neighbors who are not Jews? No. That is the most anti-Semitic thing that I can possibly imagine, is to be pro-Zionism, pro the idea of a Jewish state at the expense of somebody else. If you found a piece of land that didn't have anybody in it, not making it up as a story, land with no people for people with no land, Palestine is going to thrive in society all throughout history. And all you have to do is just look at the tombs that are in Palestine, and different cultures and different religions, and how could that be? They didn't decide, again, to give them Wales or North Carolina or, Alaska. We have a large country here. But no. It's a colonial settler project. They see the importance of Palestine is serving a purpose for them. The United States does not look at Israel except in one vision. The United States government looks at Israel as an outpost protecting our interest. Protecting our interest. Crossroad to trade, the oil in the Middle East, and the Israelis are fighting. We're not dying, they're dying, and that's okay. When you really scratch beneath the surface, US politicians are okay with the Israelis dying because they're protecting our interests. And Golda Meir told them that. Golda Meir, no, I'm sorry, again I misspoke. Abba Eban, the foreign minister of Israel, on a 60-minute show. I think it was with Mike Wallace, way back then. He asked him about they were getting how many millions of dollars from the US. What does the US get back from it? And he said, I am surprised at you. You are talking about money. It's our boys that are defending your interest. Our boys are the ones defending your interest. It's the Israeli soldiers that are dying for your interest. And you're talking about money? There is no amount of money that the US could give to Israel will equal what we're sacrificing to protect your interest. Because our boys are dying. And Golda Meir said it again after the 73 war. Again, you're talking about $1.5 billion those days, I think it was, or something. You're talking about money. And it's our boys that are dying to protect your interest. And the US sees it exactly that. Protecting our interest. Because look at what's happening. The moment we saw Israel threatened, this after October 23, there is an air bridge of 2,000-pound bombs and don't do anything except kill civilians. That takes down an entire building, just maybe because there is targeted what? There is a Hamas militant in this building. So you take out the entire block, and we continue to supply them with our 2,000-pound bombs. And not enough, we send our carrier task force. One carrier task force is not enough, we send the second, we send the third. It's because of our imperialist goals. That's why no matter who's in the White House, it's been always the case. It's been always the case. You don't question what Israel gets. In normal years, Israel gets close to $5 billion a year. And Israel has free health care to the Israeli nationals. We don't have free health care, but they do, and they're getting $4.8 billion from us. Then we brag about the health care in Israel is so great. Well, we're paying for it. The education is so great. We're paying for it. Take that money and invest it here. See what would happen. Oh, no, can't do that. Because with the, we call a welfare state? Nah. Our people have to work. And if those who can't make it by working, that's dead because they're not working hard enough. But the Israelis, they don't have to. We give them whatever they want. And we gladly do it. And again, because our politicians are getting away with it. And everything is local. Everything is local. Politics is local. No one gets out of college and becomes president. Except of this moron that because he didn't pass. But either you become a billionaire or you have to work your way up the political system. Our board of supervisors, I think they need to be held accountable. Our congressmen and women at the local level, they need to be held accountable. We need to be aware of what is going on, what resolutions are being presented, why they don't support them, where they stand on issues. We need to hold them accountable. We can't just elect them and then ignore them. That's when AIPAC becomes effective, because of the apathy on our part. We're not doing our job. And when I say on our job, we're not doing our part as Americans and the ethnic groups, Arabs and Muslims, number one. Then our allies, and I think